everybody, welcome back to another video. Hope you guys have been enjoying the content on the channel as of late, and we are back once again with another Blind Tuesdays. Last week we did the superhero genre, which was interesting because we don't typically discuss the superhero genre on this channel, and now we're dipping back into the 50s because we just did the 50s not too long ago, so now we're doing it again. And forgive me, my voice is a little bit lower in this video just because family's sleeping, so I don't want to wake them up, um, I'm gonna try to keep this short and sweet just because it's late. Gotta get ready for work tomorrow. And as is the film, I have pretty just straightforward feelings about this specific film, and it fitting the criteria of the 1950s. I figured to address a film that when watching it, just revisiting it just now, I found myself just continuously wanting to watch more of it. Um, and it speaks to the overall quality of that film, of the film. That film that we're going to discuss is a Stanley Kubrick film, that film being Paths of Glory, which was, I believe, written and directed by Stanley Kubrick, or primarily directed by Stanley Kubrick, released in 1959. I forget the exact year, but starring Kirk Douglas, and follows a primarily like more or less following the themes of the film, not necessarily one specific person. Kind of cherry picks around with certain characters, one with Kirk Douglas, but at the start, it's with these generals, as they're ordered. A general specifically orders another high-ranking officer to help command a battle against the German army, this being the French army that we're following, as they try to take the anthill, as they say. And it's an impossible task, as they lay it out in the opening minutes. It's an impossible task. It's hard. Nobody can achieve it. And the the uh, the military leadership is asking for this general to perform his duty, and they persuade him with potential higher rank, more power, more privilege, and that sways him to do his duty. And as you see, as the minutes move on, and we see him in the trenches with the soldiers, you see how he treats the soldiers, how poorly, and how just really just to them they're just disposable. They're just whatever. And then we meet Kirk Douglas's character, who is the opposite of that, who is in the actual trenches, in the warfare, has actually seen warfare, knows strategy, knows, all this stuff. Where this guy is just has not exposed to that sort of stuff, or really gives much of a care to that. And what I think I love about the film is that it represents that sort of mentality, quite frankly, throughout the entire film, especially when we're in the trenches, when we're in the battlefield. They display that concern for others, or in that ignorance in in different play fields for the concern, the emotions, the humanity element, the realism, what's actually happening, what we should be more concerned with. That is happening in the background. You hear just the explosions. You see at some points you see people walking through the screen, and it's soldiers who are injured. You hear gunfire, you hear all these things, and that's happening behind us rather than in front of us, versus what's happening in front of us is actually that of ignorance, which really is the film displaying more of its interest, thematically speaking, which is that the characters that we're following mostly are blinding and very, very selfish, albeit, Kirk Douglas's character. Um, so, um, so the battle takes place, and what happens is that they lose the battle, and there are casualties, and what happens from that is that there's a court-martial from the general because he doesn't want to take ownership, and also within the battle he decides at one point to open fire on his own men. So to cover up his mess, he decides to do a court-martial and instead place 3 soldiers in his place to take the fall for it, and display of cowardness basically in the face of the enemy. And that's the layout of the film. Now, what's interesting about the film is that it was actually banned in France when it premiered. and it was a lot to do with the depictions and the criticisms that were given towards the military leadership, and quite the blatant commentary that's being made in the film, which I believe is the proper word for Paths of Glory. You know, it's not a film that wishes to explore any gray areas or looks at a, a certain morality. I mean, it does to a certain extent, but in that exploration, it is quite blunt in the whole statement that they are trying to portray. You know, it's properly an anti-war film. It's properly has an agenda at play. It has um, uh, I wouldn't even say politically motivated. It's more about, just the handling of people, and and really what the conflict of interest is about one's um, one's ego over one's selflessness, one's care for others. That's really what the conflict is in the film, and the horror and the tragedy of what wins out in the end, which is ultimately that of the higher authority and the higher rank and the more one with more power, and the abuse of that power, and um, and the film gives little hope, in that, um, and I really love the overall representation of its themes. I love how it depicts, each side as a certain thing, but the soldiers, they're practically just pawns, and just as they are, just broken and helpless individuals. I mean, there's a scene in the film where they show two soldiers in when they're about to, take the anthill, or at least attempt to take the anthill. You see, and the soldiers prior to the day, the night before, like talking about how they wish to die, and to what's basically just a suicide mission. Um, to then the trial for these three men, and how it's unfairly favored towards the officers. The judges themselves have basically judged these men before they even laid eyes on them. Their minds are already made up, And the line of questioning is like just ignorant and immaterial, lacking an understanding of warfare or tactics. It's just, did you follow your commander's orders? No. And it's like, well, okay, then you're guilty. It's like, that's, you know. So I love how blunt the film is, and it's not, where it is looking to explore certain perspective. It's purely of one perspective. And and it's and it revels in it, um and it's just, thankfully, with Stanley Kubrick at the helm of it, you get something that is just superb in its filmmaking. I mean, the tracking shots in the trenches are beautiful. The landscapes, just the overall aesthetic of the film, just a showcase of both the trenches and when the battles take place to when the trials are happening. Um, just the pans, the trackings, like all of that is very, very well laid out and very formal. Um, and also having that grit and that dirt, that sort of dirty, um, like visualization of things, warfare and stuff like that. It's not all just very clean and sharp. It has that grit, and um, it has that that unclean quality to it, which is very, very appropriate and very authentic. So um, I think it's aesthetically and technically solid, and I think that by overall narrative, by just the structure of it, this build of tension, because ultimately what the film is, more so than anything, is a tonal driven agenda. It's not a film that is of a certain perspective or of a certain protagonist. It is about a situation, and it is about what that situation truly means, and what that situation um, means on a moral level. In that there is just scum in that government, in that system, and the tragedy that is bestowed on the soldiers, and the abuse that they have to take, um, and yeah, and the the steady build in that bleakness, in that dread. At first it's the weight of that circumstance is not really there, but as time goes on, you just see ultimately everything shape in that, how the generals, just are at with their agendas, and how everything is so to their favor, and how there again little hope for things to really change, or little hope for things to like to to win out at the end of the day. That weight really dawns on you, and to the point when their execution scene happens, it's startling, it's frightening, because there's no way out of it. It is now just an acceptance of what is about to happen, and it rattles you. The first time I watched it, and just watching it now again, it's it gets to you. So um, so I think that it's fully realized. I think that it has such details implemented throughout, um, or such details just embedded it throughout. It's not a film that is just like, oh well, we'll just showcase a few things here and there. It has such details within the writing, within the performances, within the aesthetics. It is just solid filmmaking, and that's really what drives the film ultimately, is that of solid craftsmanship, and a lot more to do with that tone that Kubrick is building ever so, you know, um, just gently, just like it's very, very gentle, very, very carefully calculated as time goes on. It's not like we go from here to here. It's just very, very steady, and you feel that. You don't feel it at the start, but eventually, it just every so slightly just builds a little bit to when you get to that point of the execution, it is just dawning on you. It is just hitting you. And it comes down to what Kubrick is doing behind the camera. Um, so it's really Kubrick, who is the star here. I mean, Kirk Douglas is great. I mean, another supporting players are also great. That one general at the beginning that we kind of see throughout the film, he is properly scum, and that guy plays him really, really well. Um, but the real star of this, of course, is Kubrick, to what he's bringing to the table on a tonal level, on a aesthetic, by technicality. That's what really is driving the film, and with that, you get something that, surprisingly, with all of its concern for technicality and structure, with a more, um, with more more of the mechanical qualities of the film are ultimately what you are seeing in the forefront. It ultimately is weirdly enough embeds itself with certain emotion and draws you in, strangely enough. Because, as I said, what is driving the film is a lot to do with what Kubrick is doing in the crafting of that tone, in the crafting of its framing. A lot of that is what's driving the film. And you would think in that there might be some distance built, but surprisingly, you are just right in there. You are right in with the characters. You are right in with the situation, and you feel it absolutely. Um, and the whole perspective, the fact that it is so blatant and so blunt in what it's addressing, it potentially could have been um, distancing, in that, well, why don't we have more perspectives to play with, more of a gray area to show, but that the bluntness in its approach to this one perspective it embeds itself with some emotion and some understanding, some real understanding. Um, yeah, and there is no need for that other perspective, because, well, we see what that perspective is, and it's just of scum. So, you know, it's really well laid out to you, and um, I think that it's just by design, just really, really good. And by overall, just film overall, just what I'm watching, I mean, just the timing of Kubrick, just with his shots, with his just the beats within the story, um, like it's Kubrick's, uh, like it's Kubrick all the way. It's not anybody else's film but Kubrick's. You know how you can like label it this, like, oh, this is this guy's film, or oh, this is this guy's film. This is properly Kubrick's film, and the star of this film is Stanley Kubrick. So, because without him, it would be just eh. But with him being there, man, does it hit, and it hits really, really hard, especially towards the ending. It just really gets to you. So, So yeah, I really like this movie. I really, really love it. It's probably one of my favorite war films. And yes, it's anti-war, but I mean, it's better that than having to exploit, war or exploit, you know, this sort of thing. At least that's just my opinion. But because it lends itself to more emotion, it lends itself to more understanding rather than exploiting it and having us kind of questioning what we're watching. Because most films, most war films are kind of anti-war in a way, just because they're just no one's sitting there and going like, yeah, let's go and fight these things, blah 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 blah, guns a blazing. It's like there's always that uh that desire to return home, you know, embedded within a lot of war films. So, but this is more blunt than most, and thankfully within that honesty or within that just that what's what I'm looking for, just that uh, just that upfront, sort of mentality. You're just enthralled, invested, and not building of a distance. It it works purely because of Kubrick. Period. Like nothing else. If Kubrick wasn't there, but Kubrick is there, and it just rocks, absolutely rocks. So. So yeah, so those are my thoughts on Paths of Glory. I thought it was excellent. I love this movie a lot. Again, just watching it now, I was like, maybe I'll just watch like 30, 40 minutes just to refresh my memory on it. But man, I just kept on watching and it is just so good. So good. So, um, but this being Blind Tuesdays and actually being at home, I figured to actually spin the wheel like we used to do. So I'm gonna pull up the wheel here and we're going to see what next week's going to offer on Blind Tuesdays. Setting the volume here. So here we go. So next week on Blind Tuesdays, it's going to be a... Oh God. Wow. Wow. Well, talk about coincidence. Since this is about the French army, and about just the military leadership in France. Next week is going to be the French New Wave. So we're going to be dipping into the French New Wave once again. So yes, that's very specific. So we'll see what we get to find from there. But yeah. So those are my thoughts on Paths of Glory. You guys know your thoughts on Paths of Glory and your thoughts on Stanley Kubrick in the comment section below. Your picks for next week, this being French New Wave, very specific. So just let me know all your picks in the comment section below. And that's gonna be it for this video, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. And until then, I will catch you guys in the next video. Bye.